Welcome to the Global Discussion with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name's Simon Hodgkins. It's a pleasure to be joined by Finola Howard today. Finola, you're very welcome to the podcast. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself and tell us all about the world that you're involved in. So over to you, Finola.
Thank you so much, Simon. I suppose I'm best known as a marketing strategist, a brand positioning strategist, a market positioning strategist. But in its simplest way, I would say, and it's kind of evolved as well as these things that usually do, is that I focus on helping businesses and the people behind those businesses take those businesses to the next level. And it's with purpose in mind. So not just any kind of leveling up or growth, but purposeful growth. I seem to be articulating it that way much more recently because it's always been the heart of what I do, of starting with purpose, mission, vision, of being much more purposeful about it, because I find it's the thing that leverages real, consistent, sustainable growth. And also, I'm saying more these days that I want to be around people who are purposeful, who want to make a difference in the world. And that doesn't mean to be this enormous change maker, but actually I really and readily acknowledge this idea that everyone has a part to play in the world to make it. And I don't mean that just as a lofty goal and kind of, airy-fairy way. I actually mean it in a very grounded way, because sometimes people underestimate the value that they bring to the world. And I think that purpose allows them to elevate themselves and see their true worth that they bring to the world. That's what I do.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I like that. I couldn't agree more. I think too often we get caught up, don't we, in chasing growth for growth's sake, looking at the analytics, thinking about, is it growing? Is the number getting bigger? And sometimes you need to take that step back, don't you? And say, well, what am I actually trying to achieve here? And I think that really, what you've explained there really touches on that core essence of, well, what's the goal? What am I trying to do here? Is it just reach more people? For what purpose? To do
exactly. Like perfectly, because, and I always ask this question of everyone, because what's really interesting to me of late is that I've realized that most people don't understand the difference between purpose, mission, and vision. And I find myself explaining it quite a lot. And I like explaining it because it means they've asked for a reason. They actually want to know more. And now we're not so shy about, can I be purposeful? Is it okay to have a bigger vision of myself or whatever? And just for clarity for your listeners, purpose is the reason we exist beyond making money. So that is, when you talk about the numbers, it's more than the money. We want the money because it allows us leverage and allows us to scale and allows us to do more of everything we are amazing at to reach a bigger audience. But your purpose is not the money. It's the reason you exist beyond making money. The mission piece is how you do it. And the vision is what success looks like. Because we not only have to have purpose, because that can get shoved in the bottom drawer, we have to know what that looks like when we've achieved it.
Yeah. And I know you talk a lot about it not being about the space, it's about the intent.
Yeah.
And also helping people, I suppose, to find that voice, to find that sort of thing that they're trying to deliver. And how do you go about that when you're working with somebody new, Finola? Do you have any sort of practices or approaches that you do when you're sort of uncovering those insights?
I like that you use uncover because I use that phrase a lot. I really listen deeply. I lean in. I don't talk as much as I'm talking right now. And I allow the pace to come. It always comes because somewhere there's a clue. There's always a clue. And I constantly listen for the clue. And I have tools that I use that I get people to do pre-work before I work with them to get them to express it in writing, because sometimes you can't hide in the writing. You can't hide. There's always some clue. I'll tell you an example of a clue that I got before. I remember going to visit a client, and at the start, they said, "We're just having breakfast now in the company, and would you like to come downstairs where everyone is?" And so I was with the CEO, and there was two people in the kitchen, and they were slicing up bowls of fresh fruit for all the staff, for all the team now. And that was not a small business. So they were cutting up maybe 20, 25. I mean, I know technically that's a small business, but 25 bowls of fruit. And they said, would you like a bowl of fruit too? And I went, sure. So, but the more that I listened in and leaned in, and I went, oh, wow, it's really this human piece, this connection piece, that there's something here in their behavior that I can see. I also find people, and that really became a clue for the brand that we developed together. Another one was when I do the pre-work, people tend to write the stuff that they think they should write at the top, and then buried below later on, like the afterthought, it's the thing they really wanted to write, but they're whispering. They're whispering, and in writing you whisper when it's the last thing down the line. And I go for the whisper.
Yeah, I like that. And it's so true what you've said, that sometimes people, particularly maybe in the pre-work process, I can see people wanting to put down what they think you want to hear. And you're not actually uncovering exactly what they need to help them grow their business, grow their brand, connect with their customers, engage, etc. And also you mentioned listening. And I know that sounds like such a simple thing to say, but we are constantly bombarded, aren't we, with messages, things to do. We're all really busy. The cell phone and mobile devices are pinging at us every second of the day. The apps are addicting us to it. We've now got AI washing over the top of everything. And we just seem to be busier and busier. And what you're describing to me sounds like there are some real steps that you need to do with people to help them to understand what's important, understand what they're doing. And is it about getting them to take a step back? Is it about getting them to really pause and think?
Yeah, it's also about them seeing, sometimes it's the mirror that you hold up. I'm thinking about a person, again, who did the work at the top, and they were talking about their customer, because, there's real magic in who you want to help. Purpose is here also of who you're here to serve. That's part of it. And when they start to articulate that customer at the very start, they're writing that should thing of, the obvious stuff, the formula stuff that someone else told them they should say. And I remember this particular client, and when she said, she started to talk so much more animatedly of, oh, these are the people. So at the start it was, these are the people that are, and giving me stats. And then she paused and she said, but these I love, these I know. And I just give the space. And then I go, but what if this was your customer? But it's to allow them to see. Also, it's permission. Sometimes it's about permission to, you think I really could look after these people? Like it's when I say it, it might sound crazy, but you start to see this fire, this light come alive in someone's soul. Like, it's, you can say that and say, but it's just a course, and it's just, they're just doing X, Y, and Z for them. But this is why I know purpose works, because someone's eyes light up. I get goosebumps. I see the truth of it. The story comes. And then I remember poking around this and just poking around and giving space and saying, we had a whole process emerge from that conversation because she came to life. We were able to really look at her product, her processes. And the more that we talked, the more that, and it's a co-creative process, where there are ideas that you don't know who originated it because you don't care.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I suppose that sort of uncovering what that true goal is, the objective, the dream almost that they have, then once you've uncovered that, of course, you work with them, don't you, to sort of scale that, to put the marketing in place, to put the plan, the process. And I'd imagine it gets quite tactical after that point. Is that right? Or
yeah, and it's also there's also so tactical, yes. to what the pragmatic stuff is to do. And sometimes it's about the tech, and sometimes it's about the process, because process is really important. Process allows you to scale. And I can talk about that, but there's another piece to this puzzle that's really, really important. It's one thing to believe when we're in a room together, to believe when you're in your own garden shed and it doesn't get knocked about by the outside world. But there is a step that has to be taken by the entrepreneur, no matter how big or small that entrepreneur is. So it can be talking about company size as well. It's, do you believe? You can be excited in the room, and then you go outside and you will second guess. You go, am I brave enough to pursue my own purpose? It's never about the tactics. It's never about, for me, I love marketing, clearly, and the marketing for me is a leverage to show somebody's brilliance, to achieve their purpose, all of that. Very pragmatic, social media strategy, content strategy, SEO, great websites, all of that stuff. That's not the thing that stops businesses. Belief is what stops businesses.
Yeah. And I know you talk about getting strategic to get results, but it's underpinned, isn't it, with that belief, that making the dream real.
Yes.
You use some quite emotive words like love and the light coming on and the fire in the belly rising up, and you're kind of really tapping into that true belief, aren't you? And making sure that that's exactly the essence of what you're trying to create. Because as you say, when you leave or when they're back on their own, that has to carry through, doesn't it? Yes, they'll have some of the tactics and the strategies, etc. But you need to have uncovered that true dream, I suppose, and that sort of magic that you're sort of describing there, because ultimately that's what they're trying to deliver. Yeah,
it's space to dream, a belief that it's possible. And then there's this balance, which is to ground it, because you can have people stay in the dream space, but they're not grounded with action. So it's like, the belief is what sustains you when the actions get really boring and exhausting and never ending and all of that. But always what I'm trying to do is find ease. That's where process comes in. So you do this deep work to go, you're uncovering purpose, you're uncovering truth, you're getting into belief, you're seeing how to express it in a brand, in how you communicate, in all of your content, in how your website, the navigation on your website, is how you deliver, and to move away from formula. Maps are amazing. I believe in maps. I believe in making life easier and not having to recreate, reinvent the wheel. But then you have to make it yours, because otherwise we're in vanilla territory and everyone's the same and you won't stand out. So dreaming, yes, but grounded in action to make it possible.
Yeah, like that a lot. And I suppose the last thing I wanted to sort of touch on here as well is that once you're on that sort of trajectory, once you have that with somebody, there's a bit of a parallel, isn't there? Because there's the individual's brand, and in a lot of cases there's the company and the position of the brand that they're doing. How do you sort of work with those two different identities, or are they one of the same? Because a lot of people are out there building a personal brand when actually what they're trying to do is drive a business and to get revenue. Do you come across that much in your work, particularly with entrepreneurs?
Yeah, loads of different angles on that question. So I give you a story of a company I worked with, tech company, and the story is, I remember the CEO was coming by my office one day. He's going, I have no time. And, everything was, he was a great wordsmith. He was able to write blogs that just gained traction for the business and opened doors, generated contacts, all that kind of stuff. But he was also doing all the other stuff to drive the growth, because, and there's a statement I would say a lot, what got you here won't take you there. Like, so he was right going, I can't do this as well, and I went, leave that one with me, right? So I ended up working within the business and saying, okay, let's create a bigger voice for this company so that it's not all about just his voice and what he says and how he communicates, because that is his personal brand, his unique voice in the marketplace that represents the company. But what we ended up doing was we created a team and we taught everybody to blog in their voice. We taught the interns, we taught the financial director, we taught the software developers, different layers in the process, but every one of them had a different perspective. And what I mean by we taught, it was this idea of, again, uncovering voice, the voice of the person within the organization to write a blog, their unique perspective, not, a rigid set of rules of how do you speak in the tone of voice of the company. It was, no, this is your perspective as an intern, as a finance director, as a HR director, as a whatever. And what happened was, and we created in such a way that no one had to check it. It was open source checked. We had it in a Google Doc and people could comment of, why don't you add this piece? So it became an extremely collaborative space so that everyone looked at each other's stuff. But before we got to that, it was that, they do a first draft and I go, no, let's pull and, dig deep, same as brand stuff, pulling out the voice. Then it got sense checked by other people in it. So it didn't have to go to the management team to get approved. We just trusted each other in the company to make sure that it fit. And as a result, doing this way, and it takes a little bit of time to do it, you create this symphony of a voice that is the voice of the company. And that's, whereas the other personal brand is because if you're a solopreneur, personal branding is easy, that differentiation between company and person, it's easy kind of understand and make sense of it. In a company, it's different. But if you think of voice as symphony, and as a result of working in this way, that company never hired a recruiting agency again because everyone wanted to work with them. That's the difference.
Yeah, very powerful, Finola. And I love the term symphony. You don't hear that in discussion. It's such a powerful term that you sort of create that symphony. I really like that a lot. Thanks for explaining that for us.
Yeah, no worries.
Now, look, you're a guest here on the Global Discussion, but you're no stranger to podcasting. So I have to ask you all about Truth, all about your own podcast, because it's very successful. It's been going for quite a while now. Tell us a little bit about where the podcast came from, who goes on your show, what do you love about podcasting?
I like talking. So that's clients came to me and they said, Finola, we have these great conversations and nobody knows about these conversations that you have until, what way you think about stuff and how you talk about stuff, unless they're talking to you and already working with you. And it kind of sat with me for quite a while. And I went, yeah, I love these conversations I'm having with these clients, because one thing you also asked me about is, people that inspire me or advice that I get, but I get advice, and as much as it's me helping my clients also give me a perspective that I learn every time in every interaction as well. It's absolutely co-creative space in every work that I do. So I really took it to heart that my clients were saying this, but nobody knows what it's like to work with you until they work with you, Finola. And I went, okay, so how can I capture that? And so I came up with the idea for the podcast. And I have this quote that I talk about all the time, which is, marketing is your truth told, because the first step is to have the bravery to tell your truth, which is the essence of who you are, your purpose, why you're here, all of that stuff. And the second part of that is, great marketing is your truth shared. And it's not you sharing your truth. It is the market shares your truth for you because it resonates so deeply with them. It's also kind of makes me, when I say that, I also think about Martin Neumeyer, who says, It's not what a brand is not what you say it is, it's what they say it is. It's important that there is this resonance. So we must first come to the market and tell our truth once we've uncovered it, and then find that resonance with the marketplace and allow the market to reflect it back to us. So in terms of choosing who to invite onto the podcast, I just want good conversation. It's very selfish. I want good conversation that I can learn from, because I feel that if I can learn from it, then that's perfect for my clients to learn from, because I'm still a growing business. I'm still wanting, as much as I want to help my clients level up their business, I must also do the same for my own business.
Yeah, I love that. So there you go. There's a great recommendation for people watching or listening to this podcast, Your Truth Shared, hosted by the wonderful Finola Howard. Go and check it out. It's on most of the platforms out there.
Thank you.
Look, it brings me nicely onto something else I'd like to ask you, Finola, and that is, obviously in your line of work, you've got to keep abreast of what's happening. Things are changing all the time. Approaches, strategies, some remain constant. Technology's certainly changing all the time. In order for you to onboard new information, to keep abreast of what's going on, whether it's in business or in life in general, how do you onboard information? Do you read a lot? Are you constantly scouring the internet? Are you always on social media? Is it through things like your podcast where you're actually having those co-creative discussions with people, or your client work? But how do you onboard with all these different channels available to us today?
I balance it, because I also find the noise quite challenging. And I think it's also possibly more important to have quiet as much as we consume information. Yeah, you're correct. I'm again quite selfish in my podcast. I also use it to learn, and I find great insights. And that's why I suppose it's conversation style, much like you have, because I really want to learn. So I'm really listening in to see what I can learn from this conversation. There's that. I consume other podcasts because I like sound as a way to take in information. But then I also like to read stuff that's really well written. That's and also that feels like I can get the soul of the person or the heart of it, so that it doesn't feel like AI. And I don't have a problem with AI, because I think it's an incredible tool to be used. and really exploring it. I'm finding I'm on a track of exploring it and testing it. So I like to go to spaces where I learn something that I can then test, because when I test, I'll see if it works, and then I'll actually roll it back to my own clients and in my own courses that I deliver. So when people often point me to stuff. I also meet an accountability group that we've been together for maybe about 5 years. And they're always suggesting things for me to step out of the box, to think about things. I don't like to curate stuff that I listen to too much, because I don't want to skew my view. I kind of want to remain open to things. Believe it or not, I also find a person of inspiration for me is my 14-year-old son, because he's going to look at things I never thought of looking at. So, and I find that very interesting, because they're so savvy about information, about where to resource it. He did a maths assessment recently where he had to do a poll, and his teacher said, talk to people to do a poll test, check this out, and then they put the results in a graph. And he said, I'm not going to talk to people, I'm going to use Reddit. And so instead of getting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 results on his poll, he got 740. And I'm like, you teach me how to do that. So I get it from loads of different inklings of clues. Like when every day my work is about listening. So I'm always, and I look for the clue in the individual client, but I also look in the clue of what I need to read about or poke around at, something that impacts me. And so it's conversation too. So yeah, I read books, I listen to podcasts, I listen to people.
Love that. Thanks very much. That's some great examples there, Finola. And yeah, it's true. It's amazing how the next generation coming through can spot things or know things that we don't. Such an important resource.
He also, can I share this with you? Sorry.
Sure.
the other snippet that I said, do you not want to buy a new book, Sean? Because he really likes to read. He said, no, I don't read books like the conventional books anymore. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, a lot of would-be authors are now publishing on Reddit to test the market before they publish in the traditional sense. So they're reading novels on Reddit.
Yeah, amazing. And I've heard similar stories of people putting things out on podcasts or, things that they write in blogs and they later become books. I've spoke to somebody recently who's wrote a book that's now becoming a movie. I mean, it is incredible how people use different tools now to ultimately get to the result that they want, But I love that, it's a nice reminder that success leaves clues in different places, doesn't it? Sometimes where we're not expecting.
Always.
Yeah.
There's always clues. We just have to become more adept at recognizing it,
Yeah.
And you feel it. I really do sense that it's not always necessarily about the intellect. It's about the marriage of the intellect and the gut that tells you, pay attention here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah. The other thing, we kind of touched on it earlier, but about advice. Now, in life, we get lots of advice given to us. We often share advice with others. But when I ask you that question, is there anything that springs to mind for you?
Two spring to mind. One, my mum said when we were very small, probably trying to get me to do my homework, but anyway, was nothing is impossible to those who try. And we've got to try. And another piece, and it's a piece that really came up in the podcast that came out this week, but also an earlier one with Aoife Dunnigan and the other one with Leisha McGrath. And it was just about showing up. Just got to show up.
Yeah.
Are you showing up today?
Really powerful pieces of advice. Yeah. And what about, things that you're focused on now? Because obviously you mentioned that your business is growing too. What are you looking like when it comes to planning? What are you looking to achieve? What does the next 6-12 months look like for you? Do you have things on the horizon that you're hoping to achieve? Is it more of the same? How does that work in your world?
It's never more of the same. That's really boring. Growth, I'm really interested in growth. I have a few things going on at the moment. One is I do a program once a year called Guided by Get Strategic. So Get Strategic is the process that I use with all of my clients one-to-one or on. There's an evergreen course as well. But Guided is where I walk them through it over 6 months. That's a program that's currently being promoted. I've started writing a book. So that because I talk about levers for growth. What are your levers for growth? What takes you to the next level? So for me, a lever will be a book. And so I just joined a writing cohort and I needed to do it as a writing cohort because, it's a solitary thing, writing a book, whereas I think if you have the accountability of someone has the map for how to write a successful book, how to do the marketing as you go along through it, but also to have other people on the same journey with you at the same stage so that, you're ticking boxes. So I just started at the beginning of April, and next Monday is my next session. And I have to have the first draft outline of the book, which I've been thinking about for a long time. So with hopefully to be published this time next year. That's the plan, not hopefully. Being published this time next year. And I'm just exploring ways I've invested in PR, in bringing a PR team on board to expand reach for me from doing my online courses and stuff like that.
I love that. And when you said you got to get your first draft in about a week from now, I immediately thought about your mother's advice.
Yes. And showing up,
Isn't that so wonderful?
Yeah, I have drafts of it, because I found I went to someone before and we mapped out a draft, but then I did nothing with it, So it's that thing of what's the impetus to make you take it the rest of the way. And that's why I say we've got to ground it in action. Otherwise we stay in our minds, dreams that stay in our minds, but not in reality. So I know my own weaknesses, so that's why I joined a cohort, to make me act.
Makes a lot of sense, yeah. And look, as we come towards the end of our time here today, the other thing I wanted to ask you is that if people want to get in touch with you, find out more about the podcast, more about the work that you do, where's the best place to send people to, Finola?
You can go to finolahoward.com or just connect with me on LinkedIn. I love meeting new people to get new ideas. So reach out. I'm there.
All right. So the LinkedIn or the website, finolahoward.com. Well, look, that brings us nicely to the end of today's episode with Finola. Thanks to everybody who's been watching or listening to us around the world. We certainly appreciate it. I'd like you to like, follow, subscribe, do all the things we need you to do to help support this podcast. And of course, Finola's podcast. And hopefully you'll join me back here for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers. But thank you, Finola. It's been wonderful to catch up with you today.
Thank you so much.